All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today. This is the second webinar of our series. If you weren't able to attend our first webinar, I just want to reintroduce ourselves. My name is Sarah Grandy with Vicente Sederberg. I am the compliance specialist. And here with me today, I have Casey Lever. She is the Director of Regulatory Compliance. So for our second webinar, we're going to be going over preparing your Massachusetts cannabis business for mock inspections. So fun stuff today. So we're just going to jump right in and get started. And we're going to be going over a few different topics. Some you'll notice were the same topics as the first webinar, just a little bit different, more geared towards your inspections. So security requirements, record keeping, inventory and storage, notification requirements to the commission, and just general sanitation and facility upkeep. All right, so we'll start with security requirements. These are they're pretty basic for the most part. However, they're very easily forgotten. So some things with security that you want to know to prepare for inspections to start is waste disposal. So people often forget that your dumpster has to be locked at all times, and that is with a commercial grade lock. So sometimes, if you're bringing out your waste, people will, or someone could just shut the dumpster, forget to lock it. You just want to make sure that you're remembering to do so. If you have an employee that's doing a perimeter check of the facility, something that you can put into that routine is to just have them check the dumpster and make sure it's locked. Another security topic to discuss is surveillance. So, as part of the requirements, you have to have 90 days worth of footage. You need to be able to print a color photo that has the date and time stamp on that printout. And you want to make sure you have functioning cameras. So, what we suggest doing is just, weekly or monthly audits to go back and check to make sure that you have that 90 days worth of footage. Or do a random printout, go back 10 days or 30 days and print a random date and time and make sure that your printer is working. Make sure that you didn't run out of color ink, and make sure that when you're printing out your picture that the date and time stamp is on that picture. Because if you can't print that color photo with the date and time stamp, you're not compliant. And then you just want to make sure that all of your cameras are functioning properly. Things happen over time, wear and tear. If there was a power outage, you don't know what can happen. And, it's very easy for an investigator to come in and do an inspection and have them check your cameras. And all of a sudden you realize that one of them, wasn't working at a certain point of time.
Yeah, this is particularly important if you use motion sensor cameras. The regs do allow you to do that, but you are required to have a notification in place where if a motion sensor camera wasn't working, somebody would be notified that the camera wasn't working. Mm-hmm. So, there have been times where an investigator says, okay, pull this footage from this particular camera. And the answer is, it's on motion, so there must not have been motion. It's a completely black screen. Mm-hmm. But really, it was that the camera wasn't functioning. There was motion in there. It was the middle of the day or something, and you were just never notified that it was not functioning. So be particularly sensitive to the motion sensor cameras, because that's where we see the most problems with finding out later that a camera wasn't functioning.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then also badging. So in the regulations, they state that your badge has to be visible, your agent registration card at all times. So just make sure that, it's easy to just put your agent registration card on a lanyard. That way it's easily visible at all times. Sometimes if you have a temporary agent registration card and your hard copy hasn't come in yet, you have this piece of paper that has your agent registration on it. So you could take that piece of paper, put it in a lanyard, and just making sure that it's visible. All right, so additional security information that you should know is signage requirements. So limited access areas. You want to make sure that your doors remain closed at all time. Very easy for you to walk through a limited access or walk into a limited access area and, forget to shut the door behind you. They have to be closed at all times. So just making sure that you're aware of something small like that. Limited access areas, limited to employees and escorted visitors. So just make sure that if you have a visitor on site, that they are always escorted throughout the facility and that nobody is in a limited access area who shouldn't be. And making sure that limited access areas have that signage posted on the door at all times. Just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, this becomes an issue with facilities that, cultivation and product manufacturing in particular, there's a lot of action. There's a lot of, just people moving in and out. There's different temperatures and things like that where signage just falls off, right? It could happen. So, as we're talking about all of these things, these are really to help you walk through your own facility and what should you be looking for that the investigation staff traditionally is going to be looking for in an unannounced inspection. And that's a big one, a limited access area sign. There's also, changes in opinions on where a limited access area sign is needed. So even if, you've done your walkthrough, you feel like there's nowhere that doesn't have it, having a stack of limited access area signs that are extra sitting in an office somewhere is always a good thing. Because even if they have an unannounced inspection and they determine mechanical room or something that previously they never said anything about needs a sign, you can fix it on site before they walk out versus getting a notice of deficiency and having to send something back. So having that extra signage available is always a good thing. Exactly.
So in relation to signage, point of sale signage. So if you are a retailer offering marijuana vaporizer devices for sale to consumers, you have to include signage at your point of sale. So there has to be 2 separate statements at your point of sale. One indicating that marijuana vaporizer devices have been tested for vitamin E acetate and other contaminants with no adverse findings, with a warning that vaporizer devices may contain ingredients harmful to health when inhaled. And then 2, a second statement indicating that consumers shall have access to the test results of marijuana vaporizer devices, including copies of any certificates of analysis provided by the device's manufacturer. And then,
Oh, sorry. I just want to add one thing on that is, you have to have that sign. That's great. But you also need to make sure that your bud tenders or retail sales agents are aware of what a certificate of analysis is. If there was to be, a secret shopper or something, and your signage is posted, that's great. But if they went ahead and asked for that, everyone needs to know what that means and where to find those.
Definitely. And then with signage, extraction signage. So this is specific to product manufacturers, but product manufacturers need to have a posting, which is a minimum of 12 by 12. And it has to identify the method of extraction in lettering no smaller than 1 inch in height. And then with product manufacturers, you also just need to comply with municipal requirements. If your municipality, indicated that you have to post a copy of a permit if you're going to keep, store, handle, or otherwise use flammable or combustible materials, then you have to incorporate that permit and signage at your facility. And then also too is any OSHA requirements for signage. You want to make sure that your facility is complying with that as well. All right, so just tying in certifications. I think that, maybe this could also be forgotten as time goes by. You want to make sure that your scales are certified by local weights and measures, and you want to make sure that you're checking the expiration date on those scales. A lot of the time, like I said, time passes and you don't even realize that your scales certifications have expired. So just make sure you're staying on top of that. Fire extinguishers, same for that as well. And this actually ties into your SOPs. So your SOPs may or may not indicate how many fire extinguishers you have throughout the facility. So just making sure that, the certifications and that they match what is included in your policies and procedures. And then also for specific to product manufacturers, you want to make sure that at least one individual, maybe a manager, is ServSafe certified. All right. Now this is retailer specific. So Casey, I know you touched on this. If you have, quote unquote, a secret shopper or an inspector or investigator come in, you want to make sure that your bud tenders or member service agent, knows how to test transaction limits. So you may have an investigator try and purchase more than they're allowed to. So a marijuana retailer, may not knowingly sell more than 1 ounce of marijuana or its combined dry weight equivalent in marijuana concentrates or edibles to a retail customer per day. So you want to make sure that your employee, doesn't allow that transaction, that, you don't surpass that transaction limit. Just something to keep in mind, Casey. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah, it's the regulations actually require that your point of sale system, itself doesn't allow you to exceed that. So right. We do know that there has been some issues with the point of sale systems where you're being told, yes, it won't let you exceed it, but you definitely need to test them and make sure that that is accurate, especially when you're combining different product types. And, there could be a system update, things happen. So just constantly make sure you're on that. And that, further, even though the system is required to prevent that, it's not a bad idea to teach your staff about what those equivalencies are, what that calculation would be, just as like a fail safe in the event that the point of sale system doesn't catch it. At least your bud tender would prevent it from the sale from actually going through.
Yep. And then, so next would be providing vaporizer inserts to consumers. So just making sure that your employees know that they have to include that information. There is the sale of disposal and reusable vaporizer pens and devices must be accompanied by a product insert identifying the materials used in the vaporizer device's atomizer coil. And then also knowing too, and we touched on this earlier, is the copy of the certificate of analysis. And again, just making sure that your employees, know what that is. And then last but not least is ID checking. I think that maybe it's so routine that people may, forget to check ID, but again, it's in the regulations. You have to make sure that, when you're checking out a customer, that they are verifying their ID at the point of sale. All right, next fun stuff is record keeping requirements. So we did, again, we touched on this in our last webinar, but I don't think that we can stress the importance enough of record keeping and documentation. So we're just gonna go through a few of these policies and procedures. With this, what you should be doing is, looking at your day-to-day procedures and making sure that those day-to-day procedures are aligning with what is actually written in your operating policies and procedures. They should match. Inventory audits and logs. You want to make sure, that you are reviewing those inventory audits at a minimum monthly. Security audit logs, same. Go ahead, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in on these ones. With security audits, there's the every 30-day requirement, which doesn't need to explicitly be done by a security vendor. And then there's the annual one. When you're doing your 30-day audits, it should be all encompassing of your security equipment. Everything from access control, cameras, your ID scanner, your generator logs, any servers. You really got to make sure as a part of that audit, of course, it's not explicit in the regs that says you have to check all these things. All it says is security equipment. But for your, internal purposes, this is your chance to kind of catch everything that could possibly, go wrong. More importantly, power and loss of records, like video surveillance records. So I would suggest that your security audit log is, you can have it just say, who did the audit, date, time, everything else, and what the result was. But when you think about what that really should be, whether that's a policy or even like a checklist attached to the audit log, it really should be all security equipment in. That does not, that shouldn't be left out is power. It's very important to make sure you have that backup power, or at least like the backup servers. All of those things are all intact too with your security audit logs. You want me to keep going, Sarah? You want to take it?
I can finish this one. So agent registration, making sure that you're following through with agent registration and that they are not expiring. You do receive an email notification from the commission letting you know when agent registrations are set to expire. So just making sure you're staying on top of that. Make sure you are checking your training logs and making sure that you are getting the required minimum training and that you are keeping a record of those logs. I think I skipped over transportation manifests, making sure that they're filled out in their entirety. Waste logs, visitor logs. Again, when it comes to these, they are easily forgotten to be filled out in their entirety. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing them and making sure that they are. Cash transportation, list of products used during cultivation. You want to make sure that you have that ongoing list of products that you're using and making sure that you are checking the labels, especially when you're bringing new product or when you're starting to use new products. And then quality control and vendor sample audits. Record keeping is required for both of these. So just making sure that you are, keeping an audit of those as well.
Yeah, and the commission just recently, if you haven't seen it yet, they did release new seed to sale guidance where I believe they actually do touch on how you can properly comply with the documentation requirements for quality control and vendor samples. And they do indicate you could put a comment in metric to do that as well. So take a look at that new guidance if you haven't had a chance to yet.
All right, do you want to take it from here on inventory and storage?
Yep. So inventory and storage, we mentioned this before. Inventory needs to be tracked in real time. Where, we kind of see this, and I'm jumping around, is with tracking waste. Be sure that when you are, tracking waste in accordance with the latest and greatest tracking requirements, that when you, put a tag on that product and it goes into your waste bin, that is also being updated with your virtual records in metric to ensure that they are, up to date by the minute. Really, what the commission has kind of verbally spoken is that provided that by the end of the day, everything is accurately reflected and physically and virtual match, that it really shouldn't be an issue. And the reason that is because specifically in retail, there's a lot of movement during the day. You may have product at your point of sale and then you bring it back for storage overnight. But I can't stress enough, accurate real-time inventory. And there's really no excuse for the commission if there's a problem because of your API. So if you're using like LeafLogix or something like that and there's an issue, the commission really doesn't care. It's really about metric to them. So when I say real-time inventory, I mean in metric, not necessarily in any other system. Metric tags. The commission, again, the new seed to sale guidance made very explicit again that there can only be 3 containers per metric tag. They also went a little step further. So if you have the seltzers or any of the beverages in your inventory, there's some clarification on how they would like you to track that as well. Visibility, metric tags should be visible. And the reason that is one, to make your life easier with inventory, and 2, when the commission comes in with their RFID scanners, they're able to easily scan all the tags versus you going rummaging through things to find that. I just kind of touched on tracking waste and quarantine, so I won't go backwards. Same thing for quarantine. I don't know if you have anything in quarantine, but if you do, make sure it's tracked. Temperature and humidity controls. When you're walking around your facility doing your own mock audit, make sure that there's a thermometer in any room where a product is stored. Make sure that you have a humidity sensor and that the humidity is right. Locks and keys. Every lock that is used in your facility for a security purpose must be commercial grade. Keys shouldn't be left in locks. Easy thing to miss. So when you're walking around, keep your eyes out for those keys. Inventory audits. Obviously you do them, but do you document them fully? Is the documentation all in one place? Does more than one person know where that audit is? Because you're not going to be, you may be, the compliance manager, you may be the CEO, but you're not always going to be there. So make sure people know where this stuff is. Adjustment reasons. If you make adjustments in metric, or if you even do it like Leaf Logics and it transfers into metric, make sure the adjustment reasons are consistent and they make sense. The commission can see the adjustment reports anytime they want. They can look for patterns even if you're not. So use those adjustment reports to, make sure your inventory is correct and check for patterns. And then spot check, print out your inventory from metric, pick a day and just pop into any particular room, whether it's cultivation, product manufacturing, or retail, and just pick a few out and just test it to make sure that your inventory is actually accurate. All right, everybody's favorite, notification requirements. So Sarah kind of touched on this before, operational updates to your SOPs. Watch what somebody is doing. Does that align with one, the regulations, and two, your actual SOPs? Little things that you think in your mind, like, well, that's not a big deal. I moved this scale here, or I, decided to handle tagging in this place, or handle, preparation for transport in this particular room instead of this one. Things like that you really need to look at, because if it changes an SOP, or if it's different than what you had presented to the commission during inspections, your investigator is going to expect to know that. You don't want them to walk in and see something going on in a place they did not expect to see that happening. There is, again, the notification requirement is within 5 days that you let the commission know of a change to any information previously provided to them. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, not do it until you have permission, but there are certain things you definitely need to take a deeper dive on and make sure that you're doing it compliantly and that your investigator is aware. Cultivation products, check your labels, update your product list. I can't emphasize it enough. Open that cabinet more than, once, just because you aren't necessarily working in cultivation or applying the product to flower doesn't mean that you should be opening those cabinets to make sure that the list is up to date and that a product that was sent as a sample didn't make its way into the cabinet where active products are being used. SOPs are compliant with new regulations. We get new guidance all the time from the commission. Between metric and the commission, there's always something new. So keeping your SOPs up to date. Incident report within 24 hours. There's a list of the required incident reporting or occasions where you'd have to send your incident report. The notification is 24 hours. The report is 10 days. So just get that notification in 24 hours. Even if it means, just a quick email to make sure that you've complied with that requirement, and then more elaborate details will come later. Changes in hours of operation, I'll let the commission know. Literally anything that you previously provided, you should stop and think about if this needs to, be communicated and how that should be communicated with the commission. All right, sanitation and facility upkeep, my favorite. Sanitize high-touch surfaces. We're in the world of COVID. There's probably a lot of that anyway, but really the sanitation shouldn't stop. In the full twist of irony, products you use to sanitize should have to be EPA registered, which also speaks to, I think we probably touched on before a little bit, was that, products used for cultivation and, products used on plants have to be stored separate from products used for cleaning purposes. So you shouldn't have, in one cabinet on the same shelf, products with EPA registration numbers and products without it. That would be an issue. If you have cleaning logs, make sure those are complete. If there's something in your SOP or your processes that says that you're sanitizing a particular area daily and that's being logged, make sure it's actually logged. Labeling products. So that doesn't necessarily mean finished products for consumer sale. That's really meant to mean labeling products that are for cleaning, for cleaning only. So there's no confusion that that product would have been used on a plant. Check for standing water. There is the general requirement that your facility stays sanitary and that you eliminate anything that could cause like pests and I think like, mold and any sort of growth, anything that, could compromise the sanitation of the facility. Standing water is a pretty common one, especially in cultivation. So if you have standing water, kind of figure out why that's there and make sure it's not attracting pests or any issues. In general organization, keep your facility nice and organized. That's good for you, you and your staff. But that also shows the commission that you not only care about compliance, but you care about, the facility, making sure it runs properly and that, everything is clean and neat and generally organized. All right. Empowering your employees. So we just talked about, most of the things that you want to do when you do a mock inspection. If you want to go through your facility and just walk around and take a look at, these different things that are going on, right? But most importantly, so when you do that walkthrough, it's not a shock and awe moment. Empower your employees to understand their role in compliance. Communicate with staff weekly, monthly, whenever you have your meetings or whenever there's something new that comes up from the commission. Communicate with them. Let them know what's going on. Maybe they don't think, it matters, right, to them because they're, they think they're just working the register. But no, what part of their job interacts with compliance? And in the cannabis industry, every part of your job does. So communicating with staff the importance and the information they need to know to do their job properly. Now, training materials. So that communication happens, right? But there's also additional training that should be done on an ongoing basis. Maybe you change an SOP. Maybe it's, new guidance comes out and you need to do training on it. You want to make sure you have those training materials updated, readily available for your team. So at any minute, they just don't know what to do on something, they can pull them out and take a look. And they have to be up to date, right? They're no good if they're not in compliance with the new regs and new seed to sale guidance. And provide resources. Tell your staff where they can find things, whether it's a link to the commission's regulations or where the public documents are listed, where you store maybe physical SOPs on site. So you definitely want to make sure that, you're really setting yourself up for success. And it's not just you doing these audits. It really is a team effort. And I think that is it. Sarah, is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
I will just say too, if we, going back to signage, I think that we skipped over this is consumer education materials or patient materials, and just making sure that you always have an adequate supply kept out. Keep in mind if, you were to get a mock inspection or have an investigator come into your facility and just say, oh, well, where are your education materials? I don't see them out right now. So just make sure you have that too. I think that's another thing that I just wanted to touch base on. But I think that was it for me. Do you have anything else?
All right. Well, I think we are going to wrap up. We appreciate you joining us today. And we do have a third webinar in the series coming up that is about, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be going into licensing and renewals and things that you need to know. There's physical facility compliance, there's record keeping that, we could talk about ad nauseum, but there's also another side of it, which is licensing, municipal requirements that you need to be aware of at all times. It's not just, I wish the commission's regulations were it, but they're not. Within the commission's regulations, there's references to food handling regulations. There's reference to compliance with municipalities and other laws that you need to be aware of as you're designing your SOPs and as you're keeping yourself in compliance. So the goal of the next webinar is really to talk about the intersection between licensing, compliance, and renewals, and what you should be doing to make sure that you're compliant from those perspectives as well.
Yep, definitely. And we're going to be going over, positive impact and diversity as well. And that's about it. If anybody,
it looks like I see a question from Corbin. Keep the MSDS sheets for cleaning supplies. Yes, I do believe that's actually an OSHA requirement. And no matter what, if there's a record of something like that with MSDS sheets, I will always tell you, yes, you should keep them. There are certain records that, like OSHA and things outside the Cannabis Control Commission regulations that you absolutely do want to keep on site, and let people know where those are if there's ever any questions about, if the commission shows up. I can't, stress enough. A lot of people need to know what's going on and what's compliant, so you don't get caught in a situation where you have to say, oh, sorry, I can't answer that. Like, so-and-so's not here today, when it is something that should be maintained for operational compliance. So long story short, yes, keep those MSDS sheets.